Friday, February 23rd, 2018, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Yeah, I like to look at the markets briefly, but also talk about the specter of war. And usually I don't cover that, but I guess it's to do with geopolitics, and it could be big, and it's to do with Israel and Iran, or Iran, as some people say. Before I start, though, let's have a look at what the markets have been doing overnight. It's 10 to 8 a.m. London, so fairly early. Gold is come off a little bit. It's at $13.27, down about $5, spot gold. The range has been $13.33 to $13.25.70 overnight. Silver is down 2.5 cents at $16.58. Range has been $16.54 to $16.66. So very narrow range. Stock market yesterday, Dow finished up, but I was looking at the market like 15 minutes before the close, and at one point the S&P and the Nasdaq were in negative territory, and the Dow was coming off almost, was trying to break the triple digits gains. So it didn't look very good at the close there, but they did manage to have it close higher. And then when after the market closed at 4 p.m. New York, we saw the futures rise, and this morning we are further up. We're at 25,180, up 220. The Dow, so that's up 0.89%. S&P futures is up 20, up 0.75%, and so is the Nasdaq. It's at 6813, up 50 points. Yeah, we're still quite, about 150 points from that Fibonacci retracement I talked about. Looks like yesterday market could have broken down. It was weak before the open in the U.S., but it did well afterwards. There was a comment from a Fed member, president, St. Louis Fed, I think, Bullard. He has come out in the past at points where the markets have been like at very, how can I say, key technical junctures on the downside, and made some dovish comments. He's not a voter in the FOMC this year, but yeah, so it looks like, am I saying it's because of him? Probably not, but some people noticed that the markets rebounded after his comments, and the comments came before the open of the main market, so they willed him in on, I think he was on CNBC. So there you go. It's interesting. One of the viewers yesterday noted that I've got 12,000 subscribers on YouTube, and CNBC has 212,000. And he said that's a shame that that number doesn't, hopefully, that spread is going to narrow in the future. The Monaco 64 CNBC spread will get tighter and tighter, and more people will come to the home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So what about currency-wise? Well, the dollar had a bad day yesterday against the yen. We were down quite a bit, over 100 pips at one point. Today, the dollar is rebounding a little bit against all the other currencies, but and that's why gold has come off a little bit. The pound is down only 0.12% at 139.38. Euro's down 1/3% at 122.90, and the dollar's up 1/4% against the yen at 107.04. So dollar taking a little bit of a breather. The way the markets feel at the moment is like a consolidation everywhere. You've got cryptocurrencies. They've rebounded, but they're still, difficult to find a direction to the upside. You've got precious metals on the weekly chart. Gold still looks pretty good, and it looks like we're forming a consolidation here. and before we go higher. Stock market looks like we're forming consolidation before we go lower. Bond yields looks like the U.S. 10-year yield is consolidating here, just between, just below 3% before it goes higher. Dollar consolidating before it goes lower. So that's how it feels right now. There's no direction, but consolidations usually happen before the market resumes the recent direction that we've had. The other interesting thing before I go on to the war story or war question is interest rates. Because, the Federal Reserve has been unwinding, they've been raising rates, while Europe is still, doing QE, rates are at 0, and we're told that the reason the U.S. rates are going up is because the U.S. economy is doing a lot better. Europe isn't doing as well, but I listened to some of the videos from that World Economic Forum, and everyone is saying how Europe was doing really great. And I have a magazine here from the end of last year, The Economist magazine. I don't buy it the whole time. I only bought it because it was an interesting article here. But it talks about, all the statistics for the countries as of November 2017. And it says U.S. GDP, third quarter, 2.3%. Euro area, which is the countries that have the euro, Q3 GDP 2.5%. Germany GDP 2.8%. And then you look at the budget deficit. United States minus 3.5%. Euro area minus 1.3%. Germany a surplus of 0.6%. And you look at the interest rates, right now, Germany, the 10-year yield is only 0.7%, which is historically, as a spread to the U.S., is huge. We are almost at 3%, 230 spread is big. I remember at a time when it got to 100, people used to put trades on, sell Germany and buy U.S., and now it's at 230. UK 10-year, 1.54. France, 0.97%. Italy, 2.08%. Spain, 1.59%. Portugal, 2.01%. All these countries that were supposed to have gone broke a few years ago, all their yields now are lower than the U.S. And even Greece, which has gone broke a few times, I guess, had to be bailed out, that's at 4.28%. 10-year, which isn't, well, it's only 130 above the U.S. basis points wise. So what's happening here? How come, that people, mainstream commentators say, oh, the dollar's, when they started raising rates in 2015, oh, the dollar's going to go higher because higher interest rates are going to make people want to hold dollars. So what's going on here? Something's going on very strange. Could it be because the market has given up, a worldwide investor have given up on the credibility of the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. Congress to keep the debt under control? Not that Europe is doing that much better, but at least the leader of Europe, Germany, they're running surpluses. And the other countries are really going, they went into austerity. They went through hardship. The U.S., yeah, I'm not saying a lot of people aren't going through hardship, but they haven't really taken the medicine. So all I'm trying to say is that this is, if when yields are going up, interest rates going up in the U.S. and the dollar keeps going down, can you imagine if they have to stop this tightening in the U.S. or become a little less hawkish, what the dollar would do? I know there are some people who think the dollar is ready to bottom, but I'm not too sure. And the other thing about GDP is that, the way they calculate it, they add government spending. So if government is spending 3.5% more than they take. That means that adds quite a bit artificially to the GDP. So, you know, in the U.S. up until late last year, budget deficit 3.5%, GDP 2.3. If you take out that 3.5 from 2.3, U.S. GDP is actually negative if you don't include government spending, and that's going to get worse. Quite amazing. The same thing for Britain. You know, the GDP here was 1.5. The latest, I know the latest probably a little more than that, but as of this publication, it was 1.5. The budget deficit was 3.3, a lot like the US. So real private sector growth was negative. But in Germany, on the other hand, you've got 2.8% GDP growth and a surplus of 0.6. So you could argue that if the government was in balance, you'd actually have 3.4% growth. In the euro area as well, 2.5% GDP. Budget deficit minus 1.3 for the whole area. You know, that's still 2.2%, 1.2% growth without government. So very interesting. So what about war? I've gone on and on here about this. Well, yesterday I read a story on Zero Hedge, and I found the story on the jewishpress.com. It says prosecution flips Communications Ministry Director to testify against Netanyahu. So that story was out yesterday. And it goes on to say, the suspended director of the Communications Ministry, Shlomo Filber, early Wednesday morning signed an agreement with the State Prosecutor's Office to provide incriminating details against Prime Minister Netanyahu in File 4000, aka the Bezek affair, in return for avoiding a prison sentence and possibly even a fine. Filber, until recently a close associate of the Prime Minister, is expected to nail down the police assertion that in return for Bezek's subsidiary news website Wallow's favorable coverage of Netanyahu, Communications Ministry regulators gave Bezek preferential treatment in order to increase the communication giant's profits, enough to enable majority stockholder Shaul Elovich to repay the huge sums he had borrowed in order to gain control of the Bezek empire. So Bezek is I think is the biggest telecommunications company in Israel. I'm not too sure, but that's what's behind this. And then today I saw another story on Zero Hedge, and I found I saw that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, had been past weekend in Munich. He was at the Munich, he was addressing the annual Munich Security Conference. And he said, the headline says from Reuters, Netanyahu says Israel could act against Iran's empire. And it goes on to say, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Sunday that Israel could act against Iran itself, not just its allies in the Middle East, after border incidents in Syria brought the Middle East foes closer to direct confrontation. Iran mocked Netanyahu's tough words, saying Israel's reputation for invincibility had crumbled after one of its jets was shot down following a bombing run in Syria. In his first address to the annual Munich Security Conference, which draws security and defense officials and diplomats from across Europe and the US, Netanyahu held up a piece of what he said was an Iranian drone that flew into Israel airspace this month. And he said, and I quote, this is what he said, Israel will not allow the regime to put a noose of terror around our neck. We will act if necessary, not just against Iran's proxies, but against Iran itself. So interesting that, you know, he's in trouble at home with the law. You know, one of his closest allies is going to testify against him for corruption in this Bezek affair. And all of the drums of war are going, you know, strongly against Iran. So yeah, watch out. You know, a cornered rat sometimes will do things that, you know, to save himself. A war with, against Iran would be huge. Iran and Israel, you could see other major powers getting involved, and it would put this Bezek affair, that would be forgotten very quickly. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Watch out for that news out of Iran and Israel. And aside from that, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share it, subscribe to my channel. Let's get that CNBC spread narrow. And you can also follow me on steemit.com and on Twitter. I'll talk to you later.